This is Women's Leadership Success.com radio, episode number 82. We all know that women are 50% of the population, and you may know that 46% of entry-level jobs are held by women. But here's the big question. Why does this number drop down to only 14% when we get to senior management? Do you think losing 84% of the most talented women is hurting companies' bottom line? Hell yes. So join me today to learn the steps that leading companies take to retain and attract female talent and at the same time dramatically increase profits.
Welcome to Women's Leadership Podcast, showing you how to influence people, improve your performance, and advance your career. Brought to you by women's leadership and career expert Sabrina Brahm and womensleadershipsuccess.com. Here's your chance to meet women trendsetters leading the way to success, accomplishment, and balance in business and life. No matter if you're a manager, CEO, or entrepreneur, join Sabrina for coaching and no-nonsense advice to improve your career and bottom line.
This is Women's Leadership Success.com radio, and today we're interviewing Melissa Greenwell. She is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the national retailer, The Finish Line. She is also a certified executive coach who helps women and men understand how they can leverage natural strengths and identify behavioral changes that will help them be successful as senior leaders. She's written a new book called Money on the Table, How to Increase Profits Through Gender-Balanced Leadership. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, I'm really excited to interview you, and over the years, in the past 7 years that I've had this radio program, we've had other people on talking about how to increase gender balance, and I'm excited because it seems like you have some new perspectives on this, so I'm looking forward to asking you about those as we have this conversation. Now, we're 50% of the population, and yet 46% of the entry-level jobs are held by women. But why does this figure drop down to 14% when we get to the C-level?
Well, it's really because we're not keeping enough women in the corporate America talent pipeline. So women are either not progressing past a certain point in their careers, generally supervisor, manager level, and then that means they're not in the pipeline to promote later into these senior leadership roles. They are dropping out of corporate America, and I think a lot of companies believe that the reason that happens is because women decide to have families and stay home and take care of families. But my research and other research shows that is not actually true. That's not where women actually go. They go on to work differently, not work.
Right. I know a lot of really talented women that have started their own business, so that's part of it too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. More businesses are started every year in the United States by women versus men.
Interesting. So this is probably a complicated thing that we're talking about, and we only have a half an hour to do that. But let's begin. What do you think has to change so that companies get women more engaged?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing I believe is that companies need to stop accepting it. Stop accepting the fact that they're losing their female talent at a critical point. This is usually when women, have accomplished their education, their college educations, and they've been in organizations for a while. So companies have made the investment to train and develop a lot of these women, and then they lose them. And so I think the first step is to do actually what my company did, and that was from the very top, the CEO saying, we're gonna change some things, and then better understanding what it was we needed to do differently to make an impact.
Now, can you talk a little bit about what you changed, and then I have a follow-up question for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it really started with understanding that this female talent either needs or wants more flexibility in their life. So in this 24/7 connected world, not all work, but a lot of work can be done outside of what has typically been, normal business hours. But what is that really anymore when we're all working, sort of all the time? So we began to think a lot more flexibly about, flexible work hours and letting people work from home, telecommuting, video conferencing. One of the CEOs that I interviewed for the book made a really great point, and he said, a lot of women work at very kind of off or odd hours because they are balancing caring for a family, so they may leave the office a little early or go offline a little early, but they're back later in the evening after the kids are put to bed or whatever. They're back online getting work done, and they don't like to waste time either. So in his view, women tend to be highly productive with their time, particularly when they're allowed to manage it.
Interesting, because I think one of the things I've heard in companies is somehow the impression that if we allow the flexible time, the person won't be as productive or they won't do as much work. And you're saying just the opposite.
Oh, absolutely, just the opposite, because I think a lot of women still view having this flexibility, and men too, for that matter. I have a lot of millennials dads who are starting families, and they want those same benefits. And so I think women and millennial men have that in common. But people won't waste their time when they're working like that, and they still view it as somewhat of a privilege. So they're highly productive, and there are actually organizations that are studying this right now that have implemented flexible work arrangements where they can for their employees, and believe that they're seeing increased productivity.
Do you have the names of some companies that people might go and look at what they're doing?
Yeah, one is I think an interesting one to watch on this subject is Procter & Gamble. So they have definitely received some very fantastic recognition relative to diversity, relative to promoting women, and they are one of the very large companies that is doing a lot of work, and has been actually for a very long time, around having a flexible workforce. So I don't know that they have any data published, but they definitely have inferred that taking this approach has yielded better productivity.
Very interesting. So if a company implements gender equality, how does it affect their profits?
So this is where brain science comes into play. So
oh boy.
yeah, and it really is interesting, and it seems to really resonate with people when I go give talks on this subject, when I start talking about the brain science and the physical differences between men and women's brains, and how that predispositions us to think differently, to communicate differently, to problem solve differently. And there are certain behaviors that, not to a person necessarily, but to a gender, are common. So, for men, they tend to be, as a gender, less risk averted and more action oriented, and women tend to be more intuitive and perhaps, better listeners. And so when you combine all of those traits in a room, you are naturally going to be able to come up with the best solutions that develop the best products and services for your customers or for your clients. So it's not different than the concept of the value of diversity, which has been talked about a lot, but it is the understanding that these different qualities or behavioral tendencies exist in the different genders, and that if we only have largely one gender in the room, we're really missing out on our full capability of problem solving.
Well, it makes so much sense, and I'm wondering if, since most companies, it's men at the top, if they have to think about those leadership positions a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
All the research that says we pick people that are just like us.
Right.
So how do you help men to begin to broaden their view of what a good leader is and what women can bring to the table?
Yeah. So in my book, I actually identify the traits most commonly displayed by women in this regard, and the traits most commonly displayed by men. So you can really begin to kind of wrap your head around, well, if I have all men or all women in the room, there are 5 traits that I'm probably going to be missing as a team. And I also talk about it in context of getting people to think about this in the context of their personal lives. How many friends or relatives, couples have had one boy and one girl, and they say, well, as a family, our family feels pretty full and complete. We're going to stop there.
Mm-hmm.
But the couple who's had 2 boys wants to try once more for a girl, or vice versa. And it's really not different than that, because people want the experience of that interaction and raising both genders.
Mm-hmm.
That family structure, one girl, one boy, feels very balanced to them. So if you think about that concept in context of the business world, it's really not different.
It makes a lot of sense. As you're talking, I have so many questions for you, so I'm kind of jumping around here, but I was thinking about this thing of, how do we get the male leaders to think differently about women? And at the same time, what I know is this isn't passive. It's not like the woman's just sitting there and the leaders are doing this thing. What do we as women leaders, as women that want to be successful in businesses and companies, what is it that we need to start showing? How do we need to show up? What do we need to let people know that's maybe different than what we've been doing in the past?
Women have a lot of behaviors that we've been conditioned, to have socially. For example, we're raised to be polite. We're raised not to interrupt other people when they're talking. We expect our contributions to be recognized, and for people to come to us and invite us to take on new responsibilities or new challenges.
Mm-hmm.
If you step back, and as I have over the decades, and watch the men around you, that's not at all how it works for them. They're out in front raising their hand, asking for the assignment, asking for the promotion, asking for more money. A lot of times, before, we as women would think they're completely ready for the role. And you know what? I'm not being critical of that. Really what I'm saying is that women have to do the same things. They've got to be willing to step forward and take a little bit more risk, ask for an assignment before they think they are 100% ready, because most women will never think that they are 100% ready to be promoted unless someone invites them, right? Unless someone puts that offer in front of them and convinces them that they're ready.
So it's stepping up and asking for what you want, and it's being willing to take the stretch and take the assignment even though you aren't 100% ready for it.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Speaking up, asking for what you want. Picking a mentor, that's really important. I've had a number of great mentors, and most of them men throughout my career. Mm-hmm. On the asking for what you want, I actually have a personal story that I can share with you briefly if
yes,
you like.
Yes,
So several years ago, I believed that I should be paid more money for the job that I was doing, and I went to HR and had this conversation with HR, and HR in turn went and had the conversation with my boss, and I did not get that raise. I did not get anything really that I was asking for, and so the next year I went and had the conversation with my boss myself, and what I learned through that is that you absolutely have to be your own representative. You can't go through other people when it comes to asking for what you want. And in that scenario, I don't think I even completely got out of my mouth, all the reasons why I thought I should be paid more, and I got everything I asked for and probably then some. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is no one can represent you as well as you can. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot harder to tell someone no to their face than it is to tell someone else to go tell them no.
Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with what you're saying. And the mentor is not to go do it for you. It's to help you to develop the strategies. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So critical.
Mm-hmm. So how did you pick a mentor? What did you find was the best way to do that?
Well, a lot of people will wait until someone, again, women are polite, approaches them and sort of unofficially, sponsors them or helps them. Mm-hmm. And I will fully admit that happened to me throughout my career. So I was fortunate that there were people who recognized that I could perhaps do more and were interested in pushing me and helping me along. I think women can speed up their careers if they go seek that assistance rather than waiting for someone to kind of pick them out from the crowd and notice them. So when it comes to picking a mentor, I think it's important to identify what you think you need to do differently or what you need help with, and then go find people that do that well. You can't just go find a mentor and say, okay, tell me what you think I should work on, or what I should do to advance my career. You've got to have some self-awareness and have some ideas of the kinds of things you need to get better or stronger in, and then find people who demonstrate that skill really well and get advice from them.
That's really makes so much sense. I'm thinking I helped somebody prepare for a job interview, and they didn't get the job. And we were doing a debrief afterwards, and this person said, well, there's no other openings right now, and it could be a long time. And one of the guys on the panel said he would help me. I said, that's great. I said, is there anybody else that you know? No, I don't know anybody. And I said, well, anybody that's ever offered to help you? Oh, well, the vice president of the company who just got promoted said if I ever needed anything, she would help me. And I said, bingo, and so I find that many times people have offered to help, and women haven't taken them up on it.
Yes, absolutely. And going hand in hand with that too is maintaining your network. I think this is really important. It's been important for me, not just for my career, but when I need information or I need to find an answer to something that I don't know, the larger my network is, the more successful I will be, because I've got people who can point me in the right direction. you can't be an expert in everything. So having a great network to help you throughout your career, I think, is really critical.
It's paramount to great success for sure. What do you do to give back to a mentor or people on your network? How do you reciprocate? What do you find as a way you can do that?
I always make an open invitation if there's anything that, I can do for you in return. And oftentimes people won't think of something right away, but something will come up later down the road for them, and they'll say, it might be, they need to connect someone with someone else in my space, whether it's retail or HR or whatever, someone else they know who needs help that perhaps I can better assist than they can.
Mm-hmm.
So those really, kind of reciprocating and giving those favors back, those opportunities present themselves. You just have to make sure that people understand that, you're willing to help them any way you can in return.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I worked with a company that decided to make the diversity and gender equality one program.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like this idea. Can you share why?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so it starts with women are 50% of the population, so
Mm-hmm.
women are not a minority. A lot of diversity initiatives are really aimed at being more inclusive and including minorities.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea of, sort of putting this topic of gender diversity, under this big umbrella topic of diversity, because I believe that the action items that we need to take are different.
Mm-hmm.
To have more, we'll call it I call it gender diversity or gender balance. I think those are different than the things that we need to do from a broader diversity initiative perspective. And it goes back to the fact that men and women should be equal, but we are not the same. And men and women have different development needs. I experience this all the time when as an executive coach and I'm working with females. I see a lot of trends in the kinds of behaviors that they need to change to to exhibit stronger leadership skills.
Mm-hmm.
And those are often not the same it's kind of the same behavioral challenges that men necessarily have. So I just think we have to be more focused on affecting gender balance than maybe some broader diversity initiatives allow us to do.
Mm-hmm. I'm also an executive coach, and I highly recommend that the women and men listening to this program get a coach, because it's so valuable to do that. And the people listening, part of the reason that I have this show is I want people that don't have access to a coach to learn from people like you. And how would you, let's assume right now you can't get a coach for yourself. How would you find out what you need to develop? What's a good way to do that?
Well, I really like a technique that actually Marshall Goldsmith writes about. You probably know who Marshall Goldsmith is.
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm. The forefather of executive coaching.
Right.
So, he taught me a technique called feed forward, and it's the idea that you go and you ask people for suggestions on what you can do to be more effective. And the premise behind that is that people are the people you're asking are more motivated to give you suggestions because it's positive, right? I'm giving you suggestions for the future versus giving you feedback that could be perceived as negative.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something you did and you didn't do it well or you did it wrong. So I use that terminology and that phrase a lot with people, with my peers, with people that report directly to me. And a lot of times that leads to a conversation around a particular example of something that happened in the past. But it's a lot more comfortable way to approach the conversation.
I like it, and I think it's important to go back and see how you're doing.
Right.
You know, so the person gave you this feedback, and a month or 2 months later, you ask them, "So I've been working on this. How am I doing?"
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're just about done, but I'm wondering, what would you want to say to men that are listening to this show? How can they help women?
Yep. There's a few things that I think men can do that would make a big difference. So one is sponsoring and mentoring high potential female talent in your organization. I think that can make a huge difference. Taking a look around to see, who's sort of operating under the radar, because I think a lot of times women prefer to get things done versus being noticed. So I think, men have to sort of pay closer attention when it comes to high potential female talent, because they're not always out in front raising their hand and waving their arms saying, sort of, pick me, pick me. So that's one. I think the other is for men to reach outside their typical or known comfortable network. So when we're looking for talent that doesn't exist inside the organization and we have to go outside, I think it's really important for everyone, but men particularly, to reach out to networks that maybe they don't know as well in search of high potential female talent.
Do you have an example?
Well, I do. So I can give you sort of a general example. Board of director searches. I think this is a perfect example. I think a lot of times, people are brought onto corporate boards, sometimes through search firms, but a lot of times through just the networks of people we know. I think a lot of senior executive positions get filled the same way. And so if our networks are not gender diverse, then chances are we're not going to get gender diverse candidates. So a lot of times, though, you might think of another professional woman that you know, whether it's in your industry or not in your industry, and think about networking with successful executive women that you do know to find other female candidates. And so it requires more effort. If these searches are going to take longer, I think a lot of male executives who do recruit women for senior level positions, they recognize that, they understand that, and they're committed to taking a little bit more time to find more female candidates versus kind of being in a hurry and just doing what might be a little bit easier.
And what about women that are successful in companies? What can they do to help this? Really
the same things. It's sponsoring and mentoring high potential female talent, and it's also pushing on breaking out of old habits and old policies and programs that have been in place that perhaps are not promoting a flexible work environment for women. It's pulling up female talent around them that I think is really important. Back in the 80s and 90s, I think women got, and perhaps deservedly so, sort of a bad rap for competing with one another versus helping one another, because they thought there were so few senior leadership roles to be had, because it seemed like there were not many opportunities for women, that it was very, very competitive. And that as that begins to change, I think we need to understand that the way we will perpetuate that change is to help other women and not compete against them.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And we're just about out of time, and I love the last chapter of your book, and I hope everyone reads it. Your book, Money on the Table. But can you leave us with a kind of a rousing what we should go do? What do you?
Well, I think I really hope the first thing that people do is read the book, because I think it really sets the stage for creating more understanding and creating the vocabulary for having comfortable conversations within the organization. I can tell you that when I started having these conversations within Finish Line, at first it was a little sort of, why are we talking about this? But then over a fairly short period of time, a lot of people, and notably male leaders within the organization, became advocates for accomplishing this, for having more gender balance in our leadership team. And we have made some significant progress. So, I think that we have to get over the hurdle of being afraid to talk about this as a first step, and educate the organization on why it makes great business sense.
Right. This is good for everyone, males and females. Definitely. Thank you so much, Melissa, for taking the time to do this interview today. I know my audience is going to really enjoy this, and I certainly have enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. Bye. I hope you like this show. If you did, I would really appreciate your help. I need more great reviews in iTunes or Stitcher.com, because every great interview we get allows more women like you to discover the show and will help them to succeed too. Please visit iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe to Women's Leadership Success podcast. Also, I really appreciate you sharing my show with your friends and associates. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining your host, Sabrina Brahm, on another Women's Leadership podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can email her at sabrina@sabrinabrahm.com. Since 1989, Sabrina and her team have helped hundreds of women managers, business leaders, and entrepreneurs with valuable trainings, articles, books, and executive coaching. For additional tips, interviews, and free access to Great Leaders Today mini course, visit www.womensleadershipsuccess.com.